and welcome to the Y'all Ain't Right podcast. I'm Brittany. I'm here with Tyler and Todd, and I'm struggling to talk today, but this is our second of the Buyer Series episodes, and this is our bonus episode. Outside of our regular weekly episodes, we occasionally will drop a real estate episode, since we are all real estate agents.
Words are not wording for you today.
Not today. But
vodka.
But again, if you guys need a real estate agent in the East Tennessee area, be sure to contact us. You can find all of our phone numbers in the details of every episode, or you can email us at holler@yarpod.com. Also, if you're looking for an agent anywhere in the nation, we can help set you up with someone. Let us know some things that are important to you in an agent. We can help find the right one, vet them before you even talk to them, and set you up anywhere that you are. So yeah. Anyway, today, our very first of the Buyer Series, we talked about things that you need to do before even stepping foot into a home. This episode is going to be more about our looking process.
When you start going out and actually looking at homes.
Yes.
You're already pre-qualified, right?
Yes.
They've already talked to a lender.
Already pre-approved. You signed with your agent, and you're ready to start looking at homes. So first things first, you're going to be searching for those homes online, figuring out which ones you want to find or go look at. So Tyler, if you could share a little bit more about that on how to find those homes.
You've already sat down with your agent, got your needs and wants list together, and told them what to go look for. So you and your agent are both going to be doing homework. So at this point, people usually have gotten their agent to set up some sort of a search, either on their personal agent website or through the direct MLS, depending on your area and who you're working with. But in the meantime, you're searching online too. My big advice there is you're going to use the big known brand places like Zillow and Realtor.com, Homes.com, things like that. Never, ever, ever, ever click the contact agent button, because somebody pays for that spot. Instead, take that link or the address, send it to your agent, and then they can go and get all of the actual details. Those sites are not always accurate. There's a lot of reasons why not to use those that I'm not going to get into right now. But the big thing is you and your agent need to be on the same page. So do that. And then that way your agent can start considering things like, how does this home fit? Is there anything I need to see on the background that you guys won't be able to see as the buyer? For example, if you're trying to look at a manufactured home and it's more than 20 years old, will your lender approve that? There's some things that you're not going to even think to ask that your agent is going to be doing background digging beforehand, looking at the property condition disclosure, for example, to see if there's any major issues marked on there that you're not going to be able to see online. So there's a lot of that pre-vetting that needs to happen before you ever even make the appointment.
Yeah, and especially like property alerts coming from your agent, that can get a little bit more specific than Zillow, and maybe filter for things like restrictions or what have you. And those sites the MLS sites are a lot of times a lot more accurate than things like Zillow. And as far as now you found the house that you want to see, whenever you send those to your agent, we've got to schedule showings and everything. Todd, as far as how long you're going to spend in a home, something you need to keep in mind is if you have maybe 6 homes that you want to see in one day, is keeping on schedule, and your agent should be able to map those out so that you're not driving back and forth all over town. But also you're going to need to keep in mind, okay, if you're someone who takes a long time at a house, maybe you want to be super thorough, you want to take measurements or things like that, let your agent know ahead of time. Otherwise, they're going to let you know a schedule. How long do you usually schedule those showings for?
Well, I mean, that's a hard part. Some people take longer, some people are in and out really quick, and it depends on the house too. Some you'll walk in and immediately know it's not it, or vice versa. They usually when people pull up, they get a gut feeling, or they walk in the door and they'll get a gut feeling on it. This is it. because it's such a personal choice and a visceral reaction a lot of times. Like when I schedule, especially if you're seeing 5, 6 on a weekend and stuff like that, you start overlapping, but you got to allow for travel time and stuff like that. So you got to map it out. But, and especially if it's a new buyer and you haven't worked with them, showed them any, you don't know how long they're going to take. That's the hard part. And then you're either playing catch up or you have gaps. Sometimes you have time to waste and stuff like that. But usually once you know somebody and shown them a couple weekends, you get a feel for how long it takes. Some people, even if they know it's not it, they'll keep looking. And I tell people, hey, if you don't like this house, you tell me, hey, no, this is not it. We can move on to the second one, and we'll figure out if we need to move it up. I've had to call list agents, say, hey, we're way ahead of schedule, or we're falling behind, and we need to move stuff back. And usually it's not a big deal. Now, depending on how popular or if the home is occupied, that's where it gets tough sometimes. Someone just can't leave if they have kids and stuff like that. It can be difficult, but I've had to make that call on the fly, and you just kind of have to figure it out and problem solve on the road. Usually works out, but some weekends it all clicks and just it works, and then other times it like falls apart around you and stuff like that. Especially if I've had car problems and stuff like that, and vice versa. You get lost or something. I've put something in my GPS and been going, and I'm like, where am I going? And like think it's really off kilter, and then you get there, and vice versa. Like you just start going, and I'm like, I don't think this is right, and then you pop up at the right place and stuff like that. So, but I've not been able to find houses too. Maybe it didn't show up on the GPS, and you're literally driving by, and it's telling you the house is over here in the field, and there's nothing there. It's like, what is going on here? And then so that happens, but you usually get a feel for people, but sometimes you have to call the list agent and just reschedule and move it up or move it back and stuff like that. So.
A lot of times the sellers are going to set that too, like they'll maximum 30-minute showing or something like that, and that's becoming more popular. 30 minutes to 45 minutes. Used to be an hour showing was pretty standard, but
I think depending on the price point, a lot of times you'll see it. Like the bigger house, they're going to give you 60 minutes, so at least then you can start overlapping. Once you get into the second and third one, you can say, oh, it takes 15 minutes to get from there to here, and so you can schedule that first one for an hour. You spend a half hour, and then you schedule that one at like 1:30 when you started it, this time and stuff like that. So it's a science. I mean, it just becomes a game. And when you get done with the day, you're like, "Ooh, that worked out good," or "I can't believe that happened." I mean, I've showed like 12 houses one time in Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area, and those are tough to gauge because it might be 10 miles away, but you're going to drive 25 miles, and stuff like that. And some of the, uses the listing service, some of them don't. So you got to use different maps and stuff like that, and that's where it gets really tough. If this person's using showing time, and this one you're using Broker Bay, and this one you have to call the list agent directly and stuff like that, that's where it gets tough.
Yeah, Sevier County is where I learned that you can use longitude and latitude to your GPS, because I always do the street view ahead of time because you never know where it's going to take you.
And I recommend, when I tell buyers, look at street view for the house, look at the area around them and stuff like that. You can kind of peek on your neighbors and stuff like that. Now, it might be old and outdated, but it'll at least give you an idea. And I tell people to try to drive by if they can.
Yeah, true. And especially, so once you're in the house and you're looking at it, the big reason why we want you to get it pre-approved before you even step foot in the house, beyond your budget, the loan type is going to dictate what you need to be looking for in the home and what would qualify for your loan. So conventional, there's typically not a whole lot of things you need to be looking out for as far as that loan type. But if you get into things like FHA, VA, USDA, what would you say are maybe some examples of things that your agent would know to look out for, or that your agent should be looking out for based on your loan type?
Well, the big thing is going to be, not to say that the government insured loans are any lesser than conventional, because they're not. They're great programs for the first time buyers or for veterans, people that want or can't access funds as easily, for what they are. They're great programs, and they can close about the same time, 30 to 45 days. But that's another thing to consider is depending on what loan type, how long will that contract be to close? If you make an offer, you need to know, is it going to take 30 or 45 days? A safe bet is probably just do a 45-day closing if you're a VA, because they have extra steps. USDA is very similar, but they all have a couple of different underwriting steps. And the appraisal is going to work more like an inspection than just a regular conventional appraisal, because they look for safety, functionality, and that's kind of their big thing. So like, for example, pretty much all of them are going to say you have to have a GFCI protected outlet within 6 feet of a water source. That's probably the number one easy to find. If I walk through a house and I see no GFCIs because it's an older home, I know we're probably going to have to deal with that. If it was built before 1978, they have to have a lead-based paint disclosure signed, and that also red flags me to say, well, is all of the paint chipping off on the front porch rails, because FHA may require me to have that painted? Or are there front porch rails because there's 4 steps and FHA says you have to have 3, if it's 3 steps or more or so many inches from the ground, you have to have handrails and steps on those steps. So there's a lot of things like that. Well-trained agent can kind of eyeball that stuff as they're walking through, but your loan type's going to dictate how we approach that. If you tell me that you're a VA, I know that when I go to compare houses, I have to be really strict, because VA will only look in the neighborhood up to a certain time period. And if they can't find comps there, they can go out farther. But if not, and they find a comp next door that was sold for, let's say, $10,000 less than your house that you're touring, well, that's the comp. And maybe that house is overpriced in VA's eyes. And with all of those government insured loans, once an appraisal is recorded in their system, it's there for 6 months. So it doesn't matter who looks at it. If you walk away and the next buyer comes in, they're going to see the same thing. So we as professionals have to kind of prevent some of those issues in the future by looking for them on the front end when we tour the home. And of course, you have to lean on us for that, because you may not know all of those things.
Yeah, because you wouldn't want to pay for an inspection just for a home that's more than likely not going to qualify. And if it needs so many things, a lot of times you're going to have the seller fix that. You're going to go in, because it is a requirement in order to close. So a lot of times you can work with the seller and have them fix that. Sometimes you might have to fix it yourself, but it does have to be done prior to closing if it gets flagged by an appraiser. So those are things that would be required in order for your loan to close. And they do have that on there, because with those loans, typically the down payment is a lot smaller than a conventional loan. Like a conventional loan, a lot of times you're putting down 10 to 15 or 15 to 20% as a down payment, whereas like with an FHA, it's typically about 3%. USDA, I think you don't even have to put a down payment for some of those, like VA. And because of that reason, they want to make sure that if you default on your loan day one, that they have to, if they ended up having to foreclose and put your house back on the market, that they can make that every bit of that money back. So they have to make sure that the home is in tip-top condition or able to appraise there, so that if they have to go and resell it, it still holds value. So
yeah. And anything that's government insured, they want to make sure that it's safe and functional. That's the biggest thing for all those is HUD controls those programs, and anything HUD has strict regulations like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say strict, but they're going to do more occupational safety stuff.
Yeah.
I just had a VA on a listing. We accepted it, and I told my guy, we don't have anything to worry about. It was a 1976 built. All the handrails were there and good. There was no peeling paint. I don't think we had to fix anything. I had one a while ago in Crossville. We took a VA and had a structure outside that didn't have any value to it, but it was run down. And I thought for sure maybe we were going to be asked to tear it down, but they didn't. So they didn't ask for any exceptions or any repairs or anything like that. So I think a lot of times people get worried about it. They get in their own head. I've had a detached garage one time that had water that was coming out of the block, and they were going to ask that to be fixed and stuff like that. But it's usually not any worse. A little bit more occupational safety than a conventional. But I don't think people get all bent out of shape.
I don't want to scare people away from using those loans at all. They're great loans, and all those things that we mentioned can and usually are going to be taken care of.
I think in my experience, I've had a handful of them, and every single one of them, it's been between 1 and maybe 3 items, and typically those items are a handrail or 2 or 3 shingles, which is couple $100. I mean, it's less than $1,000 for the seller to fix, and to this day I've not had a seller give any pushback on any of those things. One of them was like a screw in a window that prevented it from opening.
Yeah, they look at windows, roofs,
things like that.
HVAC.
Nothing crazy.
The peeling paint, I think people used to get in trouble for they would fix the peeling paint but not clean up the chips. Yeah. And then they would have to go back and fix that and stuff like that.
The rule is it has to be stripped, completely removed, and then repainted.
Yeah.
We had to tear a shed down. So where they let it go, for us, we had to tear one down.
It was a big shed. I was really surprised.
It depends on the appraiser. Yeah, some stuff they'll let go and some stuff they won't.
And I had one a friend had listed, and the furnace was inside, and that hallway wasn't 36 inches or something like that. And there's nothing you could do that you couldn't move it because it was an older furnace, but that hallway wasn't wide enough for a wheelchair or for clearance, so it just didn't pass. And
so that would be an example where one cannot be remedied,
right?
And that would disqualify it.
Yeah.
So for most of the stuff that we've said, it could and usually is easily remedied.
Yeah. And a lot of those, if you have any questions about it, there are guidelines that you can pull up, and if there's something you're concerned about, you can pull it up, look at it, say, hey, maybe this isn't worth the battle. I don't think it can be remedied. And
if it's just an older house and run down and there's no handrails and stuff like that, peeling paint everywhere, it's going to be a fixer up. You're probably not going to get a VA on it anyhow. So,
and I would also, to that effect, when you're searching for homes, don't only search for homes that say that it would go FHA, because some agents are going to say conventional and cash, even though it may be perfectly fine to go VA or FHA, because they would rather be safe than sorry, and everything is worth a look. Take your pro, go out there, look at the house, and make the decisions based on your own opinions.
The amount of times I've called an agent and said, hey, would it go VA? And they'll say, yeah, probably.
Probably.
Then why don't you put it there?
Exactly.
And that's either laziness or maybe the seller was scared, but 9 times out of 10, there's nothing to worry about.
Yeah. I think it's mostly an abundance of caution.
Yeah.
You also have bad eggs that just don't want to work with those loan types, and I don't think that's good.
I don't understand it.
Yeah, and similar to the appraisal on those, in a multiple offer situation, you're not going to have this opportunity, especially, say, 2021. I would have a lot of people say, well, is it worth X, Y, and Z? Can you pull the comps on that? And I would say, honestly, do you want the home or do you not want the home? Because this is a multiple offer situation. And I mean, I only had an issue with an appraisal one time, and it was $2,000 off, and we fixed it. But as far as the home value goes, if it's something that maybe has been sitting there for a little bit, and you go, well, why has it been sitting there? Maybe it's overpriced. Maybe, you never know. So have your agent take a look at it before you make an offer, because maybe they need to pull some comps, and just go ahead and do that on the front end and say, hey, what is this home worth? Do they have negotiation room? And maybe go in at it that way, because regardless if you're getting a loan, you're probably going to be required to have an appraisal.
Yeah.
So.
Pretty much always, unless you're paying a massive down payment. If you're paying 50% down, you can get a loan waiver.
And they've got
for conventional.
Waivers. They've got waivers, I think, for 20% down now on conventional.
Yeah.
Especially if there's a lot of comps and stuff like that in the area.
You're not getting a waiver for FHA or USDA or VA because they have to go over all that stuff that we mentioned earlier.
And we were talking about timeline. I just did a VA, and it was 30 days. And I think they were done the week before with everything. So, during COVID, stuff was taking longer because everything's got to get kicked back bank and then
Yeah.
back to the bank and stuff like that. So they're getting it done in 30 days.
USDA is probably the slowest right now. But also ask the lender.
Yeah, I was gonna say
ask
your
the lender
lender
and
will
say,
be-
hey, what's your average close time on this type of loan right now?
They
'Cause
can look
they'll-
it up and
Yeah.
Yeah.
see
They can-
how
they
long
can
it's
tell you.
taking them to get it and kick it back.
Yeah, and so any last things that you would maybe consider? I know Zillow has started putting on their fire hazard, flood zone, this, that, and the other, and it's not accurate. They're
Do not
talking
look
about
at
wind
that.
and solar
So
and everything
bad.
else. It's not accurate. Please ignore that. But as far as like things that you would maybe look out for if you're next to a creek, like you could potentially be in a flood zone, but you're probably never going to see there was one that was in a flood zone where the creek was 100 yards from the house, and then it was almost like 6 or 8 feet down off the bank that the tiny little creek was running, and it was in a flood zone.
Yeah.
So, but it's going to affect your homeowner's insurance.
Yeah.
I had one literally recently that I showed. Zillow showed it flood risk. There was no way there was any chance of getting
Same.
So it wasn't in the flood zone. It might have been touching the land, but it was an acre and it was a long strip, was not touching the house in any way.
Yeah.
So there was no issue there whatsoever, and it wasn't going to affect your insurance. But you can always ask your insurance person to look at it real quick, and they'll
Yeah.
tell you right away.
Well, you do need to, and I will say this out of experience. If you have a government insured loan, have your ignore what Zillow says because it's often wrong. Have your agent go ahead and check the flood mapping to see what the Army Corps of Engineers has rated that. And it may be that there is a flood zone on the property that is nowhere near the house. But when it comes to the government insured loans, they require what's called a flood certification from a third party. And I can tell you they almost always will require flood insurance if it's anywhere on the property. I had one that it was the flood line stopped 100 foot away from the house. The house was built up on a hill, and FHA still required us to get hazard insurance for flood.
See, I had VA one, and they didn't require anything.
Yeah,
on
it's
it.
all about that third party flood certification. So we can't make that judgment. Your lender can't make that judgment. The underwriter and the flood certification people have to put that together. So they'll be the one to make the decision on that. But I mean, when it comes to flood insurance, it's something to consider though, because you're talking about basically doubling what your homeowner's insurance is. A flood policy will cost almost the same as regular hazard insurance for your house.
Yeah. So I think that was a good part 2 of our buyer series. Also, make sure you're never trespassing. Let your agent know. Even if it is vacant land, be sure you talk to your agent before heading out there. You don't ever want to be caught trespassing. But yeah, I think that was a good part 2 of our buyer series. Join us for part 3. That will cover, we will have a contract. It'll be a Tennessee contract. So it might be different in your state. And to be honest, these are provided by the state of Tennessee. So, but honestly, if you go for a new construction, it may even be different. But we're going to go step by step through a contract and talk about the making an offer process and all the contingencies that go into that.
And when you say contract, you mean the purchase and sale agreement, the offer.
The offer,
Yeah.
yes, the offer for the home. So once you find that home that you love and you want to make an offer, we're going to cover every bit that goes into that. So
That'll be a really good one.
The exciting part.
Yeah.
be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and watch our other bonus real estate episodes under our YouTube category, real estate.
Yeah.
So,
And if there's anything you want us to cover specifically, please let us know. We really love doing these things, and we want to keep it informational for you and hope you get some benefit from it.
you can comment, email us at holler@yarpod.com, follow us on social media. Catch y'all next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. If you or someone you know is thinking about buying or selling real estate in East Tennessee, email us at holler@yarpod.com. You can also reach Brittany Hawkins at 423-270-9572, Todd Huber at 865-456-0101, Tyler Letner at 865-816-0076, and Nick Cantey at 865-250-5167. Our office at Wallace Real Estate can be reached at 865-584-4000. Make sure to ask for YAR Pod. See y'all next week.